Imagine waking up to discover that someone has stolen everything. Your name, your social security number, your medical history, the passwords to your life, all of it, sitting on sale in the darkest corners of the internet for anyone willing to pay. Between 2023 and 2025, over 40 major corporations and government agencies woke up to exactly this nightmare. Hospitals, telecom giants, law enforcement agencies, even the Pentagon, all targeted by one person operating under the alias IntelBroker. What investigators didn't expect was that this mastermind of the digital underground was just 25 years old. The damages? Over $25 million. But that number doesn't tell the real story. It doesn't capture the terror of a mother realizing her child's health records were exposed. It doesn't explain the panic of a congressman whose personal information was in the hands of a criminal. And it certainly doesn't describe the geopolitical nightmare of classified Five Eyes intelligence sitting in the wrong hands. In the shadowy marketplaces of the dark web, IntelBroker was a legend. A reputable dealer in stolen goods. Someone who delivered. Someone who couldn't be traced. Or so he thought. This is the story of how a digital ghost was captured, how the FBI followed a trail of cryptocurrency, OPSEC mistakes, and arrogance to unmask one of the most dangerous hackers of the 21st century. This is the story of IntelBroker. October 2021. The internet was about to meet IntelBroker for the first time, but nobody knew it yet. In the beginning, IntelBroker was just another script kiddie, a novice hacker, trolling forums, learning the trade, hunting for easy targets. But IntelBroker was different. While other hackers were content with small scores and minor notoriety, IntelBroker was thinking bigger, studying harder, preparing. For years, IntelBroker remained on the periphery, a developing threat that even the most sophisticated cybersecurity teams missed. But in 2023, everything changed. January 2023. A seemingly ordinary day at a San Francisco-based grocery delivery service serving Asian American communities across the United States. Millions of users had their entire profiles stored in We's database. Names, phone numbers, addresses, email addresses, even building entry codes. IntelBroker got in. Nobody knew how. Nobody knew when. But by the time We discovered the breach, it was too late. Over 1 million customer records were already in IntelBroker's possession. And IntelBroker had one thing to prove, that they were ready to play in the big leagues. The data hit the dark web forums, and the cybercriminal community took notice. Within months, IntelBroker struck again. March 2023. DC HealthLink, the healthcare marketplace for members of Congress, including senators, representatives, and their families. Passwords, social security numbers, medical histories, all breached by IntelBroker. This wasn't just a hacker. This was a threat to national security, and the U.S. government was finally starting to pay attention. BreachForums. For the cybercriminal elite, it's like the dark web's version of Amazon. A marketplace where hackers buy, sell, and trade stolen data. And by 2024, IntelBroker wasn't just a user. IntelBroker was the owner. Between 2023 and 2025, IntelBroker's name appeared on over 80 separate data breaches. Over 80 times, the hacker had become a data broker, a middleman between infiltration and disaster. And the victims kept piling up. Europol, the European law enforcement agency's own systems were compromised. 9,000 confidential records, employee information, classified guidelines. The irony, IntelBroker leaked them on the platform they now controlled. AMD, the semiconductor giant. When IntelBroker announced the breach, the stock plummeted 2.4% in a single day. Customer data, employee records, future product roadmaps, all stolen. Cisco, October 2024. But this wasn't just a breach. This was a catastrophe. 4.5 terabytes of stolen data. Not just Cisco secrets, but hard-coded credentials and source code from Microsoft, AT&T, Bank of America, and Barclays, all found in Cisco's development systems. And through it all, the payments kept flowing in. Monero, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency that was supposed to be untraceable. But criminals always make mistakes, and IntelBroker was about to make the biggest one yet. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had been watching, quietly, meticulously, connecting dots that IntelBroker thought were impossible to connect. IntelBroker claimed to be from Russia, or Serbia, or Eastern Europe. The story changed depending on who was listening. A phantom with no physical form, no traceable location, no real identity. That was the plan. But here's the problem with being a criminal on the internet. Everything is traceable. The FBI conducted a controlled purchase of stolen data. IntelBroker accepted it. The payment went to a Coinbase account, and that Coinbase account was registered under a real name, Kai West. One IP address linked IntelBroker's dark web profiles to Kai West's personal Gmail. Another IP linked his YouTube account. Another connected cryptocurrency transactions. The phantom had a face. The digital ghost had a name. By February 2025, the FBI and international law enforcement had enough. In France, in a coordinated international operation, they moved. Kai West, 25 years old, was arrested. Not in some fortress of security. Not in a high-tech lair surrounded by cryptocurrency mining rigs and multiple monitors. But in France, thousands of miles from the assumed safe haven he thought he was in. February 2025. The FBI didn't work alone. This was a joint operation involving the French National Police, Europol, and cybersecurity agencies from multiple countries. When they moved on Kai West, they weren't guessing. They had proof. For the Bureau, this was personal. IntelBroker hadn't just targeted private companies. They'd targeted the Pentagon. They'd targeted ICE. They'd targeted Citizenship and Immigration Services, stealing information on over 100,000 U.S. citizens. This was a threat to national security. In Kai West's possession, when he was arrested, investigators found everything they needed to confirm his identity: personal financial records, gaming devices, equipment linking him to years of hacking activities. The phantom had left traces everywhere. The cryptocurrency trail was damning. West had tried to cover his tracks by using Monero, a privacy coin, but even that failed. The FBI traced transactions back to him. Cryptocurrency, despite its reputation, leaves a ledger. And that ledger led directly to Kai West. What the FBI found on West's devices painted a picture of a sophisticated, meticulous criminal, but also a young man with significant gaps in operational security. Operational security, or OPSEC, is the difference between getting caught and staying free. And Kai West's OPSEC was riddled with holes. IntelBroker's online presence suggested someone operating from Eastern Europe, politically aligned with Russian interests, and connected to underground communities in Moscow or St. Petersburg. But the evidence told a different story. In Kai West's Gmail account, investigators found evidence linking him directly to IntelBroker accounts. Login credentials, payment confirmations, messages discussing specific breaches that only IntelBroker and Kai West would know about. His YouTube activity was particularly revealing. The accounts were created days apart. The viewing history overlapped. The upload times coordinated. When you're trying to hide a second identity, consistency is your enemy. And Kai West was consistent in ways that revealed everything. And then there was BreachForums. As an administrator, later as the owner, IntelBroker had access to the platform's backend. That meant logs. That meant metadata. That meant evidence that IntelBroker and Kai West accessed the forum from the same IP addresses, at the same times, from the same locations. What made this investigation even more significant was something that surprised many analysts. Kai West had joined a racist hacking group called Cyberniggers in 2023. Under that group, he'd orchestrated some of his most sophisticated attacks. This wasn't just a criminal operation, it was part of a larger ecosystem of organized cybercrime with ideological underpinnings. For the thousands of victims whose data was stolen, the consequences were real and lasting. Consider the healthcare victims. Think about a woman discovering that her mental health treatment records were exposed, or a patient realizing that intimate medical procedures were documented in a hacker's stolen files, available to anyone with cryptocurrency. Consider the congressmen and their families whose personal information was compromised. These weren't just political figures. They were people, their children, their spouses, and suddenly, their private lives were accessible to foreign actors, criminals, and anyone IntelBroker decided to sell the information to. For the companies, the financial toll was staggering. AMD alone lost millions in market value in hours after the breach announcement. Cisco had to perform emergency remediation across its entire network. But money can be recovered. Trust cannot. What made this particularly disturbing was the cold efficiency of it all. IntelBroker didn't hack for ideology. He didn't hack out of protest. He hacked because it was profitable. A social security number, $1 on the dark web. A login to a bank account, $1,000. Customer databases, thousands to hundreds of thousands, depending on quality. For many victims, the damage from the IntelBroker breaches extended years beyond the initial compromise. Identity theft, credit fraud, unauthorized accounts opened in their names. The ripple effects of Kai West's crimes are still being felt today. February 2025. Paris. What makes this story truly remarkable is what happened after the arrest. French authorities didn't just grab Kai West off the street. They were part of an international law enforcement symphony that had been orchestrating this moment for months. The FBI's New York field office had been leading a complex fraud and cybercrime investigation. The Department of Justice's Southern District of New York was building the case. And in France, local authorities were working in concert, knowing that Kai West was hiding just outside American jurisdiction. When they arrested West, it was in a coordinated operation that simultaneously arrested 4 other BreachForums administrators. These weren't lone wolves. This was a criminal organization with hierarchy, specialization, and division of labor. IntelBroker was the data acquisition specialist. Others handled the marketplace logistics. Some managed customer relations. The communications between these administrators tell a fascinating story. Despite operating in the shadows, despite claiming to be invisible, they ran BreachForums like any legitimate business. They had disputes to settle, customers to satisfy, quality control to maintain. On the 25th of June 2025, the federal indictment against Kai West was unsealed. 4 counts related to cybercrime. The charges included computer intrusion, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Each count carried potential penalties up to 20 years in federal prison. To understand the severity of what Kai West is facing, you have to understand federal cybercrime law. These aren't minor charges. These are the kinds of charges that carry penalties reserved for some of the most serious criminal enterprises. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, passed in 1986 and updated multiple times since, grants federal courts jurisdiction over hacking cases that cross state or international lines. Almost every hacking case fits this definition. Kai West's crimes crossed not just state lines, they crossed international borders repeatedly. Prosecutors documented damages exceeding $25 million. But this number is conservative. It represents immediate financial losses, remediation costs, legal fees, stock price impacts. The actual cost to society in terms of healthcare systems disrupted, government functions compromised, and personal privacy violated is exponentially higher. To put this in context, Kai West joins a list of cybercriminals who've received decades-long sentences for similar crimes. In 2015, Guccifer, the Romanian hacker who breached Hillary Clinton's server, received 52 months. In 2022, the administrators of Silk Road received 20-year sentences. The precedents suggest that Kai West is facing a significant prison term if convicted. But first, he has to be extradited from France. The US and France have an extradition treaty, but the legal process can take years. West could spend years in pretrial detention in France, while the courts decide whether to send him to the United States to face trial. What makes Kai West unusual among criminal hackers is his profile. He's not a political activist. He's not a corporate spy. He's not motivated by ideology or national allegiances. He's an entrepreneur of crime. In interviews with cybersecurity journalists before his arrest, IntelBroker actually showed a concerning level of confidence about his operations. He claimed to be doing this all while operating within ethical and legal boundaries, a deeply ironic statement, given that his entire enterprise was fundamentally illegal. Psychological analysis of cybercriminals suggests that young hackers like West often suffer from what experts call invisibility intoxication. When you're anonymous, when you're hidden behind cryptocurrency and VPNs and burner accounts, the usual consequences of crime become abstract. You don't see the victims. You don't hear their despair. You see only the thrill and the profit. From 2021 to 2025, Kai West evolved from a script kiddie learning the ropes to the owner of the internet's largest dark web marketplace for stolen data. That kind of rapid rise typically accompanies a psychological transformation. The more successful the criminal becomes, the more they believe they're untouchable. The more they believe they're untouchable, the more mistakes they make. And mistakes they were, using the same IP addresses for personal and criminal accounts, registering cryptocurrency wallets with real identity documents, displaying YouTube viewing patterns that matched between accounts. These weren't sophisticated counterintelligence techniques. These were the mistakes of someone who'd achieved such remarkable success that they started believing they were genuinely invisible. What makes the IntelBroker case significant extends far beyond Kai West himself. It illuminates the architecture of organized cybercrime in the 21st century, an ecosystem as sophisticated as any legitimate multinational corporation. IntelBroker was the acquisition specialist. There are initials and vulnerability researchers who identify weaknesses. There are network penetration specialists. There are data exfiltrators. There are money launderers who convert cryptocurrency back to fiat currency. There are customer service representatives who handle complaints from buyers of stolen data. BreachForums, under IntelBroker's administration, operated like a legitimate business. It had escrow services to prevent fraud. It had rating systems so that buyers could trust vendors. It had a forum moderation team to enforce rules and remove scammers. The irony is profound. Criminals running the most legitimate-looking business operations on the internet. What allowed law enforcement to finally penetrate this ecosystem was coordinated international action. The FBI couldn't have caught Kai West alone. The French police couldn't have done it alone. Europol couldn't have done it alone. But together, they could trace the digital trails that led to a 5-year-old in Paris. Global cybercrime damages are estimated to reach $10 trillion annually by 2025. The IntelBroker operation alone accounted for only $25 million, a rounding error in the larger ecosystem. But it's emblematic of a larger truth. Cybercriminals are winning. They're winning because they operate at scale, with sophistication, and with the protection of anonymity. The arrest of Kai West doesn't mean the problem is solved. In fact, it raises more questions than it answers. If the FBI can catch one hacker, why can't they catch thousands? If they can trace one cryptocurrency transaction, why is money laundering still so prevalent? If they can identify one dark web marketplace, why do 10 more spawn in its place? Within weeks of BreachForums being disrupted and its administrators arrested, copycat sites had already sprung up. The demand for stolen data isn't going away. The market is too profitable. The supply of hackers is too deep. What's changing is the defensive landscape. Companies are investing billions in cybersecurity. Governments are developing cyber warfare capabilities. There's an arms race happening in real time between attackers and defenders. And for every tool that defenders create, criminals are already thinking about how to overcome it. The most significant takeaway from the IntelBroker case isn't that one hacker was caught. It's that he operated for 4 years before being caught. 4 years. During which time he compromised over 40 major organizations, stole information from millions of people, changed the trajectory of people's lives, and almost got away with it. Kai West was 25 when arrested. He started his criminal career at 21. He achieved more in 4 years than some criminals achieve in a lifetime. That raises a disturbing question. How many other 1-year-olds are currently launching their criminal careers right now? How many are operating with even more sophistication? How many will never be caught? As of this documentary's production, Kai West remains in pre-trial detention in France, awaiting extradition to the United States. His legal team is mounting a defense that will likely focus on a few key arguments: challenging jurisdiction, questioning the validity of certain evidence, and presenting West as a young man who got caught up in criminal enterprise rather than orchestrating it. But the evidence against him is overwhelming. The federal prosecutors have cryptocurrency transactions. They have IP address logs. They have access to BreachForums servers, which stored administrative records. They have testimony from cooperating witnesses among the other arrested administrators. The case by most legal standards, is strong. If convicted on all charges, Kai West could face up to 40 years in federal prison. The U.S. federal system has no parole. You serve the time you're sentenced to. At best, if he cooperates with prosecutors and receives substantial sentence reductions, he could be looking at 8 to 12 years. At worst, he could spend the next 2 decades of his young life in federal prison. And that's just the criminal penalty. There are also civil suits. Victims can sue for damages. Companies can pursue their own claims. Kai West, if convicted and imprisoned, will emerge to a world where his assets have been seized, where his reputation is permanently destroyed, and where he has lost the peak years of his youth to incarceration. The story of IntelBroker is ultimately a story about choices. It's a story about a young man, with intelligence and skill, who chose a path of crime instead of contribution. It's a story about technological vulnerabilities that persist despite billions spent on cybersecurity. It's a story about an international criminal enterprise that operated in plain sight within the dark web ecosystem. But it's also a story about law enforcement adaptation. The FBI, working with international partners, demonstrated that no digital phantom is truly untouchable. It took time, it took resources, it took coordination across borders and jurisdictions. But the phantom had a name. The ghost had an address. And now, the world's most notorious data broker faces justice. For the millions of people whose data was stolen, there's no easy recovery. For the companies whose operations were disrupted, there's no undoing the damage. For the law enforcement agencies now tasked with preventing the next IntelBroker, the challenge is clear. They need to move faster, think more strategically, and remain vigilant. Because Kai West isn't the first, and he certainly won't be the last. The real battle isn't between law enforcement and individual hackers. It's between the forces of security and the forces of insecurity. Between those building walls and those tearing them down. Between those trying to protect data and those trying to steal it. And in 2025, that battle is as heated as it's ever been. The IntelBroker case is a reminder that in the digital age, everyone is a potential target. Companies need to behave as if they're under constant attack, because they are. Individuals need to treat their personal data as an asset that requires protection, because it is. And governments need to invest in the sophisticated investigative capabilities required to catch the most dangerous criminals of our time. Kai West believed he was a phantom. Untouchable. Invisible. He was wrong. And in proving him wrong, the FBI sent a message to every hacker watching from the shadows. There is nowhere to hide. Not on the dark web, not behind cryptocurrency, not behind a digital alias. We are watching, we are learning, and justice will find you.